Picture this, it's 7:30 a.m. in downtown Chicago. Michael Lawson, 42, stands before his office window on the 37th floor, the city sprawling beneath him like a living circuit board. In 2 hours, he'll present a strategy that could reshape his company's future and his career. Yet despite weeks of preparation, his mind is a battlefield of doubt. What if the board sees through me? What if I freeze? What if this is the day they finally realize I don't belong here? This cascade of negative thoughts isn't unique to Michael. It's something we all experience, those creeping doubts, the constant worry, the mental replays of past mistakes that drain our energy and distort our reality. Negative thinking is like an unwelcome house guest who arrives for a weekend but stays for months. At first, it seems manageable, just a moment of frustration or self-criticism. But before you know it, it's a cycle, a habit that shapes how you see yourself, your life, and the world around you. But what if I told you that negative thinking doesn't have to control you? What if ancient wisdom, tested over centuries, holds the keys to breaking free from that cycle and reclaiming power over your mind? Today, we're diving into the timeless wisdom of Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor who led Rome during some of its most challenging years. Despite facing wars, plagues, and betrayals, he developed mental frameworks that allowed him to maintain clarity and wisdom, frameworks that are astonishingly relevant to our modern American lives. As Marcus himself wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." This idea sits at the core of Stoic philosophy. While we can't always control what happens around us, we can control how we perceive it, how we think about it, and how we respond. That's where true freedom lies. Throughout this episode, you'll discover practical strategies to break the hold of negative thinking. We'll explore how to shift your perspective, reframe challenges, and create habits that foster resilience and clarity. From controlling your perceptions to embracing impermanence, from the power of your words to the strength of purposeful action, these aren't abstract concepts, but actionable steps you can implement today. This isn't about forcing toxic positivity or ignoring real struggles. It's about understanding how your thoughts work, learning to manage them effectively, and building a mindset that empowers rather than undermines you. Whether you're struggling with workplace anxiety like Michael, facing relationship challenges, or simply tired of that critical voice in your head, these Stoic practices offer a pathway to mental freedom. By the end of our journey together, you'll have practical tools to recognize negative thought patterns, challenge their authority, and replace them with perspectives that serve rather than sabotage you. So if you've ever felt weighed down by doubt, fear, or frustration, stay with me. Let's learn how to kill negative thinking and reclaim the power over our minds, starting right now. Lesson 1. Perception is reality, the power of mental control. Jessica Taylor, 38, sits in her corner office overlooking Madison Avenue. As creative director at one of New York's top advertising agencies, she's just received scathing feedback on a campaign her team spent months developing. The client called it uninspired, off-brand, and a complete misunderstanding of our vision. Her first instinct? Devastation. Her mind immediately constructs a narrative. I've lost my creative edge. Maybe I never had it. They'll realize I'm a fraud. This could end my career. Her heart races, her face flushes, and she feels the weight of failure pressing down on her chest. But then Jessica does something remarkable. She takes a deep breath, unclenches her jaw, and asks herself, is it the feedback that's causing this pain, or is it my interpretation of what this feedback means? This question gets to the heart of what Marcus Aurelius understood nearly 2,000 years ago. He wrote in his personal journals, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment. In simpler terms, it's not what happens to us that causes suffering, it's how we think about what happens. The client's feedback is objective reality, words on a page, vibrations in the air. But Jessica's interpretation that it means she's a failure, that her career is in jeopardy, that her identity as a creative professional is threatened, that's her perception. And perceptions can be changed. This distinction between events and our interpretations of them is the cornerstone of Stoic philosophy and modern cognitive psychology. It's also the first and most powerful weapon against negative thinking. Consider your own life. When someone cuts you off in traffic, is it the event itself that sends your blood pressure soaring, or your interpretation that they did it intentionally, that they disrespected you, that people are inherently selfish? When you receive criticism, is it the feedback that hurts, or your belief that the criticism defines your worth? Our perceptions are the lens through which we view the world. When that lens is clouded by negative thinking, even minor challenges can feel insurmountable. A single critical comment becomes evidence of our inadequacy. A mistake becomes proof we'll never succeed. A setback becomes confirmation that we're doomed to failure. But this lens isn't fixed. We can clean it, adjust it, even replace it entirely. Back in her office, Jessica begins this process. First, she creates distance between herself and her thoughts. Instead of thinking, I'm a failure, she notices, I'm having the thought that I'm a failure. This subtle shift is powerful. It recognizes that thoughts are events in our consciousness, not statements of fact or identity. Next, she challenges her interpretation. Is one negative client response really evidence that she's lost her creative edge? Haven't there been dozens of successful campaigns? Didn't the client approve 3 other projects just last month? By examining the evidence, she realizes her interpretation isn't aligned with the full reality. Finally, Jessica reframes the situation. What if this feedback isn't a judgment of her worth but an opportunity to better understand the client's vision? What if this failure is actually a chance to demonstrate her team's resilience and adaptability? What if the best creative work comes from this kind of iteration and refinement? As Marcus Aurelius advised, choose not to be harmed and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed and you haven't been. This concept is what psychologists today call cognitive reappraisal, the conscious reevaluation of a situation to change its emotional impact. Research has consistently shown that this skill is associated with greater psychological well-being, reduced anxiety, and increased resilience to stress. What Marcus Aurelius discovered through philosophical reflection, modern science has confirmed through rigorous study. Consider another example. Tom, a 45-year-old sales director in Boston, loses a major account he's been nurturing for months. His immediate perception, this is a disaster. I've wasted months of work. My numbers will be down and everyone will see I'm not cut out for this role. This interpretation triggers a cascade of negative emotions, shame, anxiety, despair. But when Tom applies the Stoic principle of controlling perceptions, he consciously shifts his viewpoint. This is a setback, but not a reflection of my worth or ability. Perhaps there were factors beyond my control. What can I learn from this experience to improve my approach with other accounts? Same event, radically different experience. Epictetus, another Stoic philosopher, reinforced this idea when he wrote, "Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens." Some things are up to us and some things are not up to us. This distinction, focusing on what we can control, our perceptions rather than what we cannot, external events, is essential for breaking free from negative thinking. This doesn't mean ignoring reality or plastering a fake smile over genuine challenges. Jessica still has a dissatisfied client. The campaign still needs reworking. There will still be difficult conversations and long hours ahead. But by changing her perception, she transforms an existential threat into a solvable problem, paralyzing anxiety into productive focus. To begin mastering your perceptions, practice these 3 steps. First, awareness. Pay attention to the thoughts that arise when you face challenges or criticism. Notice how quickly your mind constructs interpretations and stories around events. This awareness alone can create valuable space between stimulus and response. Second, challenge those interpretations. Ask, is this story I'm telling myself objectively true? Is there evidence for and against it? Are there other ways to view this situation? Often, you'll find that your negative interpretations are assumptions, not facts. Third, consciously choose a perspective that empowers rather than diminishes you. Not by denying reality, but by selecting an interpretation that acknowledges challenges while recognizing your capacity to meet them. Marcus Aurelius offered this practical advice: when you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. They're like this because they can't tell good from evil. But I have seen the beauty of good and the ugliness of evil and have recognized that the wrongdoer has a nature related to my own. This preemptive reframing helps set our perceptions before events even occur. 3 weeks later, Jessica's team presents a revised campaign. The client loves it, calling it exactly what we needed and worth the wait. But Jessica's victory isn't just the successful campaign, it's the mental freedom she maintained throughout the process. By controlling her perceptions, she controlled her experience. As she walks home through Manhattan that evening, Jessica reflects on how different the past weeks would have been had she clung to her initial interpretation. The same external events, client feedback, campaign revisions, team discussions would have occurred, but her internal experience would have been one of anxiety, self-doubt, and suffering instead of challenge, growth, and ultimately pride. The power to choose our perceptions doesn't eliminate life's difficulties, but it transforms our relationship with them. It's the difference between being tossed about by every external event and standing firm amid life's inevitable turbulence. As we move deeper into our exploration of Stoic wisdom for conquering negative thinking, remember this foundational truth: while we can't always control what happens to us, we always have power over how we perceive it. And that power makes all the difference. Lesson 2. Uprooting negativity, tracing thoughts to their source. Dr. James Rivera, 41, sits across from his client in his sun-filled Phoenix office. As a respected therapist specializing in cognitive behavioral approaches, he's skilled at helping others identify and challenge their negative thought patterns. Yet, as his 4:30 appointment leaves, an all-too-familiar voice whispers in his own mind, "You didn't help her at all. Everyone will eventually realize you're not qualified for this work." Despite his professional success, a thriving practice, speaking engagements, and published articles, James battles an undercurrent of insecurity that colors his perception of himself and his work. The irony isn't lost on him. The cognitive distortions he helps clients recognize are the very ones that plague his own thinking. Negative thinking isn't just an annoying habit, it's a deeply ingrained pattern with specific roots. These roots often stretch back to our formative experiences, the messages we internalized during childhood, our cultural conditioning, and even our evolutionary wiring. To overcome negative thinking, we must first understand where it comes from and why it holds such power over us. Marcus Aurelius recognized this when he wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." This metaphor elegantly captures how our thinking patterns gradually infuse our entire perspective. If we repeatedly expose our minds to negative, critical, or fearful thoughts, that becomes our default lens for viewing reality. For James, his negative thought patterns stem from a specific source: growing up with a father whose standards were impossible to meet. Despite academic and professional achievements, James received only cursory acknowledgement followed by questions about how he could have done better. This early experience created a mental framework where James is never quite enough, a framework that now operates largely outside his conscious awareness but colors his self-perception. Negative thoughts often emerge as protection mechanisms. As James reflects on his background, he realizes that his self-doubt serves as a shield. If he questions his abilities first, he's somehow prepared for criticism from others. If he preemptively acknowledges his inadequacy, he's protected from the pain of having others point it out. It's a maladaptive strategy that might have made emotional sense when he was young but now limits his confidence and joy. Seneca, another Stoic philosopher, offered insight into this phenomenon when he wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." Our minds create elaborate scenarios of failure, rejection, or disaster not because they're likely, but because they're attempting to prepare us for worst-case outcomes. This hypervigilance might have helped our ancestors survive in dangerous environments, but in our modern context, it primarily generates unnecessary stress and suffering. Consider how often your negative thoughts begin with "what if?" followed by a catastrophic scenario. What if I fail? What if they reject me? What if everything falls apart? These thoughts rarely reflect likely outcomes, but rather represent the mind's attempt to prepare for threats that may never materialize. James's breakthrough begins when he starts keeping a thought journal, a practice he often recommends to clients. For 1 week, he documents his negative thoughts, noting when they occur and, most importantly, tracing them back to their origins. Patterns quickly emerge. His self-doubt spiked before consultations with certain types of clients, particularly high-achieving professionals who remind him of his father. This awareness is the first crucial step in uprooting negativity. As Marcus Aurelius advised, the universe is change, our life is what our thoughts make it. By becoming conscious of previously unconscious patterns, we gain the power to change them. The process of unraveling negative thinking involves 3 key practices. First, identification. Pay attention to your automatic thoughts, especially during moments of stress, disappointment, or anxiety. What stories do you immediately tell yourself? What assumptions do you make? What predictions about the future instantly form in your mind? Simply noticing these patterns without judgment begins the process of disempowerment. Second, investigation. Once you've identified a negative thought, examine its origins. Ask yourself, where did I learn to think this way? What experiences shaped this belief? Is this my authentic perspective or one I've inherited from others? Is this thought protecting me from something I fear? Often, you'll discover that beliefs you take as truth are actually interpretations formed during times of vulnerability. Third, challenge and replacement. After understanding the source of negative thinking, you can begin to question its validity and usefulness. Is there evidence that contradicts this belief? How has this thought pattern served or limited me? What alternative perspective might be more accurate or helpful? For James, this process reveals that his imposter syndrome stems not from any actual inadequacy, but from internalized voices from his past. The belief that he's not enough isn't objective reality, but a story he learned long ago and continues to tell himself. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, our life is what our thoughts make it. With this understanding, James begins consciously challenging his negative self-talk. When the familiar "you're not qualified" thought arises, he doesn't fight it or shame himself for having it. Instead, he acknowledges, there's that thought again, the one I learned from constantly trying to meet impossible standards. It's an old pattern, not the truth about my capabilities. He then intentionally replaces this thought with evidence-based alternatives. I've successfully helped hundreds of clients. I regularly receive positive feedback. My training and experience have prepared me well for this work. Rebecca, a 37-year-old software engineer in Pittsburgh, goes through a similar process of uprooting negativity. Whenever she faces coding challenges, she immediately thinks, I'm going to fail at this. Everyone will see I don't belong in tech. Through reflection, she traces this pattern to being one of few women in her computer science classes, where male classmates and professors sometimes questioned her abilities. Understanding this root allows her to recognize these thoughts not as truth but as echoes from a specific context that no longer defines her reality. The process of uprooting negative thinking is rarely a one-time event. These thought patterns have created deep neural pathways in our brains, well-traveled routes that our minds naturally follow. Creating new pathways requires consistent practice, self-compassion, and patience. As Epictetus wisely noted, make it your study then to confront every harsh impression with the words, "You are but an impression and not at all what you seem to be." By understanding the roots of our negative thinking, we gain the perspective needed to loosen its grip. We realize that many of our most painful thought patterns are not inevitable truths but conditioned responses that we have the power to change. With awareness, investigation, and consistent practice, we can gradually transform the color with which our souls are dyed, from the dark hues of negativity to the clearer, brighter tones of a more balanced perspective. Lesson 3. Mental Renovation, Building a Stronger Mind. Catherine West, 42, stares at her computer screen in her Houston apartment, the harsh blue light illuminating her face as midnight approaches. As a structural engineer, she's always prided herself on precision and competence. But 3 months ago, she was passed over for a promotion at her firm, a position she'd been working toward for years. Since then, her mind has been running an endless loop of self-criticism. I'm not creative enough, she tells herself. I'm too rigid. I've wasted years at this company. At my age, I should be further along in my career. These thoughts have become so familiar that Catherine no longer questions them. They feel like the truth and unchangeable reality that defines her worth and potential. But what if these thoughts are just habits? What if the mind, like a house, can be renovated, outdated structures torn down, new ones built in their place? Negative thinking patterns are like old wallpaper. Once they're up, we stop noticing them. They fade into the background of our consciousness, influencing how we feel and act without our awareness. Yet the mind is remarkably adaptable. Just as it learned these patterns, it can unlearn them and adopt new ones. This process of replacing harmful thoughts with empowering ones is what it means to renew your mind. Marcus Aurelius understood this when he wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." Our mental patterns create our experienced reality. Change the patterns, change the experience. The science of neuroplasticity confirms what the Stoics intuited. Our brains physically change based on how we use them. When we repeatedly think certain thoughts, we strengthen the neural pathways associated with them, making those thought patterns more automatic. The good news is that we can deliberately create new pathways through consistent practice. Catherine's journey toward mental renovation begins when she realizes a profound truth. She doesn't have to accept every thought that crosses her mind. Just because a thought appears doesn't mean it's true, helpful, or worth her attention. This realization comes during a weekend workshop on professional development. The speaker asks participants to write down their most persistent negative beliefs about themselves. Catherine writes her familiar script, "I'm not creative enough. I'm too rigid." Then comes the pivotal question, what evidence do you have that contradicts these beliefs? Catherine pauses. Evidence? She's never considered looking for evidence against her negative thoughts. They've always felt so obviously true that questioning them seemed pointless. But as she reflects, counterexamples begin to surface. There was the complex foundation design she developed for the Children's Hospital, a solution her colleagues called innovative. There was her reputation for finding elegant solutions to structural challenges within tight constraints. There was the junior engineer who told her, "I've learned more from you in 6 months than in my entire graduate program." For the first time, Catherine considers that her negative self-assessment might not be the complete picture or even an accurate one. This awareness creates a crack in the foundation of her negative thinking, allowing light to shine through. Seneca wrote, "The mind is slow to unlearn what it has been long in learning." Catherine's negative thought patterns weren't created overnight, and they won't be dismantled overnight either. Mental renovation is a process that requires patience, consistency, and specific strategies. The first strategy is awareness. We can't change what we don't notice. Catherine begins paying attention to her mental narrative throughout the day, especially when she feels anxious or discouraged. She realizes that her mind generates dozens of self-critical thoughts daily, judgments so automatic that they've been invisible. The second strategy is examination. Once she notices a negative thought, Catherine pauses to evaluate it. Is this objectively true? Is there evidence for and against it? Is this thought helping me or harming me? Often, she discovers that her harshest self-judgments don't hold up to scrutiny or serve any constructive purpose. The third strategy is deliberate replacement. When Catherine catches herself thinking, "I'm not creative enough," she intentionally shifts to an alternative perspective. "I have both analytical and creative strengths. My creativity shows up in how I solve structural problems." Over time, these new thoughts create new neural pathways, making positive perspectives more accessible. Marcus Aurelius offered practical advice for this mental renovation when he wrote, "If you are pained by any external thing, it is not this thing that disturbs you, but your own judgment about it. And it is in your power to wipe out this judgment now." This wiping out of unhelpful judgments and replacing them with more balanced ones is at the heart of mental renewal. A powerful tool in this process is reframing, shifting perspective to see challenges as opportunities rather than threats. When Catherine reflects on being passed over for promotion, she gradually shifts from seeing it as evidence of her inadequacy to viewing it as a chance to reassess her career path. Perhaps there are other firms where her skills would be better valued. Perhaps there are specializations within engineering that would be more fulfilling. What initially felt like a devastating setback slowly transforms into a catalyst for positive change. Another essential practice is gratitude. Our minds have a negativity bias, an evolutionary tendency to focus on problems and threats rather than on what's going well. Gratitude consciously counteracts this bias by directing attention to the positive aspects of our lives. Catherine begins ending each day by noting 3 things she's grateful for: small victories, moments of connection, or simple pleasures she might otherwise overlook. James, 53, a high school teacher in Minneapolis, employs similar strategies to renovate his thinking. After receiving critical student evaluations, his mind immediately jumped to, "I'm a terrible teacher. I should quit." Through deliberate practice, he learns to reframe, "Some students are struggling with my teaching style. How can I adapt to reach them better while maintaining what works for others?" This shift from catastrophizing to problem-solving transforms not only his emotional experience but also his effectiveness in the classroom. Epictetus reminds us, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Mental renovation isn't about denying reality or pretending everything is perfect. Catherine still faces career challenges. James still receives critical feedback. But by changing how they process and respond to these realities, they fundamentally alter their experience of them. 3 months into her practice of mental renovation, Catherine notices significant changes. The critical voice in her head hasn't disappeared entirely, but it's no longer the loudest or most authoritative voice in her mental landscape. She's created space for other perspectives, ones that acknowledge her strengths, recognize her growth potential, and treat her with the same compassion she would offer a friend. More importantly, she's discovered that her mind is not a prison of fixed thoughts and beliefs, but a home she can redesign. By questioning her assumptions, challenging her mental habits, and consistently practicing new ways of thinking, she's not just renovating her mind, she's reclaiming her power to define her own experience of life. Lesson 4. Your mental ecosystem, cultivating positivity. Ryan Alvarez, 39, stares at his phone screen as he sits in his stylish San Diego office overlooking the harbor. As the founder of a rapidly growing digital marketing startup, he should be celebrating his company's recent success. They've just landed their biggest client yet. Instead, he's scrolling through Instagram, comparing himself to competitors who seem to be growing faster, innovating more brilliantly, and living more impressively. With each swipe, his mood darkens. By the time he sets his phone down, the victory that had him elated this morning feels hollow. His mind buzzes with thoughts of inadequacy. We're falling behind. Everyone else is doing better. It's only a matter of time before our clients realize they should go elsewhere. What Ryan doesn't fully appreciate is how profoundly our environment, both physical and social, shapes our thoughts, emotions, and overall mindset. Just as plants are influenced by the soil they're planted in, the water they receive, and the amount of sunlight they get, our minds are continuously affected by the environments we immerse ourselves in. Marcus Aurelius understood this connection when he wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." While it's true that our thoughts determine much of our experience, what shapes those thoughts? Often, it's the people we spend time with, the physical spaces we inhabit, and the information we consume. Negativity and positivity are both contagious. When we're surrounded by chronic complainers or cynics, their perspective gradually infiltrates our thinking. Conversely, when we spend time with optimistic, solution-oriented people, their approach rubs off on us. This isn't about superficial positivity. It's about recognizing that our social environment has a subtle but powerful influence on our mental habits. For Ryan, his digital environment has become toxic. The carefully curated success stories he consumes daily aren't representative of reality. They're highlight reels that omit struggles, failures, and the mundane aspects of running a business. Yet by immersing himself in these partial truths, he's creating a mental ecosystem where he constantly feels inadequate. Epictetus advised, "If you wish to improve, be content to appear clueless or stupid in extraneous matters." This wisdom reminds us that sometimes improvement requires stepping away from information or comparisons that don't serve us, even if that means being out of the loop on certain matters. After a particularly discouraging evening of social media scrolling, Ryan makes a decision. He doesn't delete his accounts. He needs them for business, but he establishes boundaries. No social media first thing in the morning or last thing at night. No checking competitors' accounts more than once weekly, and only with a specific purpose. He installs an app that limits his daily usage to 30 minutes. Within a week, he notices a difference. Without the constant influx of carefully crafted success stories, his mind has space to appreciate his own achievements and focus on his unique business vision rather than imitation. He's not denying reality or avoiding useful information. He's creating a healthier information environment that fosters clarity rather than comparison. Our physical environment also profoundly affects our mental state. Clutter, noise, and aesthetic elements all influence how we think and feel. Seneca noted, "A crowded mind leaves no space for contemplation." The same applies to a crowded space. Amanda, 47, a customer service manager in Cleveland, transforms her home office from a chaotic dumping ground for household papers and projects into a calm, organized workspace with plants, good lighting, and minimal distractions. The impact on her work focus and mental clarity is immediate. The external order fosters internal order. Perhaps most influential are our social environments, the people with whom we regularly interact. Jim Rohn famously said that we are the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. The Stoics would likely agree, recognizing that human beings naturally mirror and absorb the attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors of those around them. Ryan faces this reality when he realizes that one of his business partners, Devin, has become increasingly negative. Every opportunity is met with why it won't work, every challenge is catastrophized, and every competitor's success is framed as their own failure. After several frustrated months, Ryan initiates a difficult conversation about how this mindset is affecting the company culture. "I value your critical thinking," Ryan tells him, "but we need to balance identification of problems with creation of solutions. The team is becoming afraid to bring new ideas because they expect immediate criticism." This conversation doesn't immediately change Devin's approach, but it establishes a boundary around how negativity can express itself in their working relationship. Ryan also begins spending more one-on-one time with his other partner, Sophia, whose pragmatic optimism helps balance his perspective. When challenges arise, Sophia acknowledges them realistically but always pivots to "what can we do about this?" rather than dwelling on doom scenarios. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." By intentionally exposing himself more to Sophia's problem-solving mindset and creating boundaries around Devin's catastrophizing, Ryan gradually dyes his thinking with more constructive colors. Cultivating a positive mental ecosystem doesn't mean avoiding all negativity. Life inevitably includes challenges, disappointments, and legitimate concerns. Rather, it means creating an environment that helps you respond to these realities in constructive ways instead of spiraling into rumination or despair. Consider the media you consume. News outlets and social media algorithms often prioritize alarming, outrage-inducing content because it drives engagement. While staying informed is important, constant exposure to catastrophic or divisive content shapes your perception of reality, often making the world seem more dangerous and hopeless than it actually is. Rachel, 51, a financial analyst in Denver, establishes news boundaries. She stays informed through a daily 30-minute review of balanced sources rather than constant alerts and feeds. She's not less informed, but her information diet is more nutritious and balanced, supporting mental clarity rather than anxiety. The physical spaces we inhabit can either deplete or replenish our mental energy. Even small changes can shift the atmosphere, opening blinds to let in natural light, introducing plants, reducing clutter, or creating a dedicated space for activities that nurture your mind, reading, meditation, or creative pursuits. Seneca advised, associate with people who are likely to improve you. This doesn't mean abandoning friends going through difficult times or surrounding yourself only with cheerleaders who never challenge you. Rather, it suggests being intentional about who influences your thinking and perspective. For Ryan, this means joining a mastermind group of fellow entrepreneurs who share challenges honestly while maintaining a growth mindset. These monthly meetings provide a reality check against both his insecurities and the polished narratives on social media. The group celebrates successes, troubleshoots problems, and reminds each other that behind every overnight success are years of unseen effort and setbacks. 6 months after beginning to consciously cultivate his mental ecosystem, Ryan's thinking has noticeably shifted. He still faces business challenges and occasional comparison traps, but his baseline perspective is more grounded and constructive. By curating his digital consumption, reshaping his physical workspace, and being intentional about his social influences, he's created an environment that supports resilience rather than rumination. The power of the environment doesn't eliminate personal responsibility for our thoughts. Rather, it acknowledges that willpower alone is often insufficient for lasting mental change. By strategically adjusting the contexts that shape our thinking, we make it easier for our minds to develop healthier default patterns, creating an ecosystem where positivity can naturally flourish. Lesson 5: Stoic Action, Moving Through Negativity. Megan Thompson, 43, sits at her desk in downtown Philadelphia, staring at the blinking cursor on her screen. As a project manager for a major healthcare system, she's responsible for implementing a new patient portal, a high-visibility initiative with tight deadlines and multiple stakeholders. The project plan is due to executives tomorrow, but Megan hasn't been able to start it. It's not that she doesn't know what to do. With 15 years of experience, she's more than capable. But each time she begins, a wave of anxiety washes over her. This has to be perfect. If there's a single flaw in the plan, the whole project could fail. People's healthcare access depends on this. I need to think it through more completely. Hours pass. The cursor keeps blinking. The plan remains unwritten. Megan is trapped in a common cycle. Perfectionism leads to procrastination, which increases anxiety, which reinforces perfectionism. Her negative thoughts create paralysis. But there's a way out of the cycle, and it starts with a fundamental Stoic principle: action. Marcus Aurelius expressed this clearly when he wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." This straightforward directive cuts through the mental clutter that often keeps us stuck. Instead of endlessly analyzing, worrying, or planning, Stoicism emphasizes doing, taking concrete steps forward, however imperfect or small they might be. Negative thinking thrives in inaction. When we sit idle, our minds have time to replay fears, doubts, and past mistakes on an endless loop. One of the most powerful ways to disrupt this cycle is to take deliberate, purposeful action. Action shifts your focus from worrying about what could go wrong to working on what you can make right. As Epictetus advised, don't explain your philosophy. Embody it. This wisdom applies perfectly to overcoming negative thinking. We can't think our way out of negative thought patterns. We must act our way out by creating new experiences that challenge our limiting beliefs. For Megan, the breakthrough comes when she remembers advice from a mentor: start with the bad version. Rather than aiming for perfection from the outset, she gives herself permission to create a rough draft, something to improve upon rather than a finished product. This simple shift breaks the spell of paralysis. Within minutes, she's outlining key project phases. The plan isn't perfect, but it exists, and existing is the first requirement of improvement. Stoic action begins with focusing on what's within your control. Many negative thoughts stem from obsessing over things we can't change, other people's opinions, past mistakes, or unpredictable outcomes. When we redirect our energy toward actions within our sphere of influence, we regain a sense of agency and purpose. Consider Daniel, 46, a high school English teacher in Austin who becomes fixated on a negative performance review from his principal. For days, he ruminates on the criticism, questioning his teaching ability and imagining worst-case scenarios about his career. The turning point comes when he asks himself, what aspects of this situation can I control? He can't change the review itself or his principal's perspective, but he can implement specific teaching strategies to address the feedback and document his improvement. By focusing on these actionable steps rather than the unchangeable review, he transforms anxious rumination into productive progress. Another key to Stoic action is breaking down overwhelming tasks into smaller, manageable steps. When faced with a complex challenge, our minds often catastrophize, seeing the task as impossibly difficult. This perception triggers avoidance, which only increases anxiety and negative self-talk. Epictetus offered timeless advice on this approach: make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. By identifying the smallest possible action that moves us forward and focusing exclusively on that step, we create momentum that carries us through larger challenges. For Megan, this means dividing her project plan into 5 distinct sections and committing to complete just the first section in her initial work session. Once that's done, she moves to the second, then the third. Each completed section builds confidence that erodes her negative thoughts about inadequacy and potential failure. A third aspect of Stoic action is aligning what you do with your core values. When our actions reflect what matters most to us, they naturally generate a sense of meaning and purpose that counteracts negative thinking. As Seneca noted, "He who is brave is free." Freedom from mental suffering comes not from avoiding challenges, but from facing them in a way that honors our deepest principles. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself of this daily, writing, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work as a human being. What do I have to complain of if I'm going to do what I was born for, the things I was brought into the world to do?" Rachel, 52, a nonprofit director in Baltimore, applies this wisdom when fundraising anxiety threatens to overwhelm her. Rather than focusing on the potential for rejection or failure, she reconnects with the organization's mission, providing arts education to underserved communities. By grounding her actions in this purpose, the negative thoughts about possible rejection lose their power. Whether a particular donor says yes or no becomes less important than the consistent effort aligned with her values. Taking action also builds evidence that contradicts negative beliefs. Many of our self-limiting thoughts persist because we haven't challenged them with contrary experiences. Each time we face a fear and survive, complete a task we thought was beyond us, or connect with someone despite social anxiety, we create concrete evidence against our negative assumptions. Carl, 38, a software developer in Seattle, spent years believing he couldn't speak effectively in public. This belief limited his career advancement and reinforced negative self-perception. The shift began when he joined a small presentation skills group and committed to giving one 3-minute talk each month. Each successful presentation, however modest, created evidence against his belief in his incompetence. Within a year, he was confidently leading team presentations to clients, not because his fear disappeared, but because he acted despite it. Stoic action doesn't mean you'll eliminate all obstacles or avoid all mistakes. What it does mean is that you'll move forward despite them. The Stoics believe that life's challenges aren't barriers to growth but opportunities for it. Every time you take action in the face of negativity, you prove to yourself that negative thoughts don't have to define your capabilities or limit your choices. As Megan completes her project plan, imperfect but thoughtful and on time, she realizes something important. The negative thoughts didn't disappear during the process. The voice that said, "This won't be good enough," remained present. But action changed her relationship to that voice. Instead of being paralyzed by it, she worked alongside it. The voice became background noise rather than a commanding presence. This is the essence of Stoic action, not the absence of negative thoughts, but the decision to act despite them. As Marcus Aurelius wisely observed, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. The very challenges that seem to block our path can become the path itself when approached with a mindset of purposeful action. By focusing on what's within your control, breaking tasks into manageable steps, aligning actions with values, and building evidence against limiting beliefs, you create momentum that transforms how you relate to negative thinking. You shift from passive victim to active participant in your life, and in that shift lies freedom. The next time negative thoughts threaten to immobilize you, remember, you don't have to wait until you feel confident or certain to begin. In fact, action usually precedes these feelings rather than following them. As the Stoics knew, we don't primarily think our way into new ways of acting, we act our way into new ways of thinking. Lesson 6. Words as Tools, Reshaping Your Mental Landscape. Eliza Montgomery, 36, sits in her Los Angeles apartment, surrounded by half-finished manuscripts. As a writer who's published several moderately successful novels, she should be working on her latest book due to her publisher in 3 months. Instead, she's frozen, her creativity paralyzed by an internal dialogue that has grown increasingly toxic. "This is garbage," she tells herself, staring at yesterday's work. "Nobody's going to connect with these characters. My last book was a fluke. Everyone's going to realize I'm a fraud." The words echo in her mind, forming a barrier between her and the story she wants to tell. What Eliza hasn't fully recognized is the immense power of words, not just the ones she writes for others, but the ones she speaks to herself. The language we use, both in our internal dialogue and in our conversations with others, carries remarkable power. Words aren't simply descriptions of reality, they actively shape how we perceive and experience the world. When negative language dominates our thoughts, it reinforces doubt and fear, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy that limits our potential. Marcus Aurelius understood this influence when he wrote, "The things you think about determine the quality of your mind." This applies not only to what we think, but how we express those thoughts. Words aren't merely reflections of our mental state, they're tools that can transform it. The power of words begins with our inner dialogue, that constant stream of thoughts running through our minds. Pay attention to how you talk to yourself when facing challenges. Do you use phrases like, "I can't handle this," or "I always mess things up"? These statements may seem like simple observations, but they're actually powerful programming that shapes your self-perception and capabilities. Eliza's breakthrough begins during a morning walk along Venice Beach. Frustrated by her creative block, she calls her friend Maya, a psychologist. After listening to Eliza's struggles, Maya asks a simple but profound question: "Would you ever talk to a friend the way you talk to yourself?" The question stops Eliza in her tracks. Of course she wouldn't. She'd never tell a fellow writer their work was garbage or that their success was just luck. She'd be encouraging, thoughtful, and constructive, pointing out strengths while gently suggesting improvements. Yet somehow she's normalized a level of self-directed cruelty she'd never inflict on another person. This realization marks the beginning of Eliza's journey toward transforming her inner language. She starts by simply noticing her verbal patterns without judgment. When she catches herself thinking, "This is garbage," she doesn't criticize herself for the negative thought that would only add another layer of negative self-talk. Instead, she acknowledges it. "I notice I'm being harshly critical right now." This small shift from identification with thoughts to observation of them creates crucial space between Eliza and her inner dialogue. Her words become objects she can examine rather than truths she must accept. Epictetus taught, "Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens." Our words are among the few things truly within our control. We can't always choose our circumstances, but we can choose how we frame them through language. Next, Eliza begins consciously reframing her internal statements. When "this is garbage" arises, she deliberately shifts to "this is a first draft, and first drafts aren't meant to be perfect." When "I'm a fraud" surfaces, she replaces it with "I'm a writer who, like all writers, has moments of doubt and moments of clarity." These reframings aren't about denying challenges or forcing toxic positivity. Eliza doesn't tell herself this is brilliant when she doesn't believe it. Instead, she chooses language that's both honest and constructive, words that acknowledge reality while creating space for growth rather than shutting it down. The words we speak aloud to others are equally powerful. Mark, a 47-year-old marketing director in Portland, notices how differently his team meetings feel when he consciously shifts his language. Rather than saying, "The campaign failed to meet expectations," he says, "We learned valuable insights about what resonates with our audience." Same reality, different framing, and dramatically different impact on his team's motivation and creativity. Seneca advised, "Associate with people who make you better." Our words play a crucial role in whether we lift others up or drag them down. When we consistently use language that focuses on problems without solutions, past mistakes without lessons, or fears without possibilities, we become the kind of presence that depletes rather than energizes those around us. One powerful tool for transforming your verbal landscape is the practice of affirmations, intentional positive statements that help reprogram mental patterns. While sometimes dismissed as simplistic, research in cognitive psychology and neuroscience supports their effectiveness when used properly. For Eliza, this doesn't mean generic statements like, "I am successful." Such broad affirmations often trigger internal resistance when they don't match our current self-perception. Instead, she creates specific, believable affirmations like, "I've overcome creative challenges before and I have the tools to do it again," or "I'm committed to the process of writing, not just the outcome." These statements feel true enough to accept while still gently stretching her self-concept in a positive direction. Over time, as she repeats them daily, especially before sitting down to write, they begin to reshape her default thinking patterns. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "Our actions may be impeded by them, but there can be no impeding our intentions or our dispositions, because we can accommodate and adapt." This adaptive capacity begins with the words we use to frame our experiences. By intentionally choosing language that empowers rather than limits us, we create mental pathways that lead to resilience and growth. Language also shapes how we perceive time and possibility. Notice how often negative thinking employs absolute terms. "I'll never succeed," "Things always go wrong," "I'm always overlooked." These sweeping generalizations collapse time, erasing both past successes and future possibilities. By replacing them with more accurate temporal language, "I'm facing a challenge right now. This particular project didn't go as planned," we recognize the transient nature of difficulties. After a particularly difficult day when no words seem to flow, Eliza catches herself thinking, "I'll never finish this book." She consciously rewrites this thought, "I'm struggling with this chapter today. Tomorrow may be different." This simple adjustment reopens the future, making space for possibility where absolutist language had closed it off. Another powerful linguistic tool is replacing passive language with active constructions. Compare, "I was devastated by the criticism," with, "I responded to the criticism with disappointment." The first phrasing positions you as a passive recipient of emotional impact. The second acknowledges your agency in how you process experiences. This subtle shift reinforces your capacity to choose your responses rather than being at the mercy of external events. 3 weeks into her conscious language practice, Eliza notices significant changes. Her writing sessions feel different, not always easier, but less fraught with existential dread. When negative thoughts arise, she has tools to address them rather than being overwhelmed. The internal dialogue hasn't disappeared, but it's become more balanced, more supportive, more conducive to creativity. Words have the power to create worlds, both on the page and in our minds. By becoming intentional about the language we use, we can transform limiting narratives into expansive ones, harsh self-criticism into constructive feedback, and pessimistic forecasts into open possibilities. As Eliza returns to her manuscript with renewed focus, she keeps a quote from Marcus Aurelius nearby: "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." Through her conscious choice of words, both internal and external, she's gradually changing the color with which her mind is dyed, from the dark hues of fear and self-doubt to the clearer, brighter tones of possibility and resilience. Your words are not just descriptions of your reality, they are architects of it. Choose them wisely and watch as they begin to build a mental landscape that supports rather than undermines your deepest aspirations. Lesson 7. Unbreakable: Building Emotional Resilience. Dr. Alicia Jackson, 41, steps out of Dallas Presbyterian Hospital into the scorching Texas heat, pulling off her mask as the automatic doors close behind her. As a critical care nurse who became a department director during the pandemic, the past few years have tested her limits in ways she never imagined. Today, after a 12-hour shift dealing with staffing shortages, administrative demands, and a patient coding, she feels the weight of it all pressing down on her. In her car, she rests her forehead against the steering wheel and allows herself a moment to acknowledge the truth: she's burning out. The emotional toll of leadership during crisis, the relentless pressure to remain strong for her team, the accumulation of hundreds of difficult days, it's catching up with her. Yet tomorrow she'll return. The question isn't whether she'll face more challenges, but how she'll respond when they inevitably arise. Life is unpredictable. No matter how carefully we plan or prepare, challenges, setbacks, and disappointments are guaranteed. The question isn't if you'll face difficulties, it's how you'll respond when they arise. Emotional resilience is the ability to adapt and thrive despite adversity, and it's one of the most powerful tools for overcoming negative thinking. Marcus Aurelius understood this well, writing in his Meditations, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." This insight forms the foundation of resilience from a Stoic perspective. We cannot control much of what happens to us, but we can develop the inner resources to respond effectively rather than being overwhelmed. Resilience isn't about avoiding pain or pretending everything is fine. It's not toxic positivity or emotional suppression. Rather, it's about developing the capacity to experience difficult emotions without being defined by them, to bend without breaking, to acknowledge pain without being consumed by it. Dr. William Rodriguez, 45, a psychologist specializing in trauma recovery, explains resilience is commonly misunderstood. It's not about toughening up or avoiding negative feelings. In fact, acknowledging difficult emotions is essential to processing them constructively. Resilience is the ability to feel deeply while maintaining your core functionality and sense of self. For Alicia, building resilience begins with acceptance, recognizing that some aspects of her situation are beyond her control. She can't eliminate staffing shortages nationwide or instantly fix systemic healthcare issues. When she focuses on these uncontrollable factors, her frustration and sense of inadequacy intensify. But when she redirects her energy toward what she can influence, her leadership approach, self-care practices, communication with her team, she regains a sense of agency that is essential to resilience. Epictetus taught this principle clearly: make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. This distinction between what we can and cannot control is the foundation upon which emotional resilience is built. By focusing our energy on our sphere of influence rather than wasting it on factors beyond our control, we develop the capacity to navigate challenges effectively. Another key to resilience is reframing setbacks as opportunities for growth. When something difficult happens, resilient people don't deny the pain or challenge, but they actively search for possibilities within it. This doesn't mean every hardship is a blessing in disguise. Rather, it means that even in painful circumstances, growth and learning remain possible. Marcus Aurelius articulated this perspective when he wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." In modern terms, we might say that obstacles aren't just barriers, they're also doorways to new capabilities, insights, and strengths. When Adam, 53, a finance executive in Chicago, unexpectedly lost his position after a company merger, his first response was devastation. His identity and sense of security were deeply tied to his role. But after the initial shock, he began asking different questions. What skills have I developed that I couldn't have gained elsewhere? What possibilities might exist now that weren't available before? How might this challenge reveal strengths I didn't know I had? This reframing didn't eliminate the real difficulties of job loss, but it transformed a purely negative experience into one with potential for growth. Within 6 months, Adam had launched a consulting practice that offered greater flexibility and ultimately more satisfaction than his previous position. Resilience also requires self-compassion, treating ourselves with the same kindness we would offer a friend facing difficulty. Many of us are unconsciously harder on ourselves than on anyone else, mentally berating ourselves for weaknesses or mistakes we would readily forgive in others. This harsh self-criticism doesn't motivate improvement, rather, it depletes the emotional resources needed for resilience. Seneca advised, if you would judge, investigate. Applied to ourselves, this means examining our struggles with curiosity rather than condemnation. When Alicia notices she's being self-critical about not managing her stress better, she pauses and asks, would I judge a colleague this harshly for being human? What would I say to a friend facing similar challenges? This shift from self-judgment to self-compassion doesn't lower standards, it creates the emotional safety needed to acknowledge mistakes, learn from them, and move forward effectively. Research consistently shows that self-compassion is associated with greater emotional resilience and decreased negative thinking. A powerful tool for building resilience is mindfulness, the practice of present-moment awareness without judgment. When we're mindful, we create space between stimulus and response, between what happens and how we react to it. This space allows us to choose our responses rather than being driven by automatic reactions. For instance, when Alicia feels overwhelmed by a new administrative demand, she practices a brief mindfulness technique, 3 conscious breaths, noting physical sensations in her body and mentally labeling her emotions, feeling frustrated, feeling anxious. This simple practice doesn't change the external situation, but it prevents her from being hijacked by her initial emotional reaction, allowing her to respond more effectively. Epictetus taught, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Mindfulness creates the pause that makes chosen reactions possible. Building resilience also involves developing a supportive community. The Stoics valued self-reliance but also recognized the importance of meaningful human connection. Research confirms that social support is one of the strongest predictors of resilience during challenging times. For Alicia, this means being vulnerable with trusted colleagues about her struggles rather than maintaining a facade of perfect strength. It means reaching out to her mentor when she's uncertain about a leadership decision. It means prioritizing time with friends who energize rather than drain her. These connections provide both emotional support and perspective when negative thinking threatens to take hold. Lastly, resilience requires practice. Just as physical strength develops through consistent exercise, emotional resilience grows through intentionally facing and working through challenges. Each time we successfully navigate a difficulty, even a small one, we build confidence in our capacity to handle future challenges. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, the art of living is more like wrestling than dancing. You must be ready and steady to meet sudden attacks. This metaphor captures the nature of resilience, not a performance where all moves are choreographed, but a responsive capability developed through practice and experience. 6 months after her moment of recognition in the car, Alicia hasn't eliminated the challenges in her work. The healthcare system is still strained and difficult days still occur. But she's developed a toolkit for navigating these challenges, focusing on what she can control, reframing setbacks as opportunities for growth, practicing self-compassion and mindfulness, leaning on her support network, and building resilience through daily practice. The next time you face adversity, remember that resilience isn't about avoiding pain or pretending everything is fine. It's about developing the inner resources to face challenges directly while maintaining your core strength and sense of self. By cultivating this capacity, you create a foundation that negative thinking cannot easily shake, a foundation from which you can face life's inevitable difficulties with courage, wisdom, and an unbreakable spirit. Lesson 8. The Gratitude Advantage, Shifting Your Focus. Michael Reeves, 47, sits in gridlock traffic on Chicago's Kennedy Expressway, his knuckles white as he grips the steering wheel. It's Tuesday morning, 8:37 a.m., and he's already 22 minutes late for an important client meeting downtown. His blood pressure rises with each passing minute as the sea of brake lights extends to the horizon. Inside his mind, a familiar narrative unfolds. This is ridiculous. I'm never going to make it. The client will think I'm unprofessional. Why does this always happen to me? This whole day is ruined before it even starts. Michael's experience is universal. When life doesn't meet our expectations, our minds naturally gravitate toward what's wrong, what's missing, or what could be better. This negativity bias is hardwired into our psychology. Our brains are Velcro for negative experiences and Teflon for positive ones. It's an evolutionary adaptation that helped our ancestors survive by staying alert to threats, but in modern life, it often creates unnecessary suffering. Gratitude offers a powerful antidote to this natural tendency. It's not just a pleasant emotion or polite gesture, it's a deliberate practice that shifts your attention from what's lacking to what's already present. In doing so, it fundamentally alters your experience of reality without changing a single external circumstance. Marcus Aurelius understood this when he wrote, "Do not indulge in dreams of having what you have not, but reckon up the chief of the blessings you do possess, and then thankfully remember how you would crave them if they were not yours." This wisdom reminds us that much of our unhappiness comes from taking for granted what we already have while fixating on what we lack. For Michael in traffic, practicing gratitude doesn't mean pretending he's not late or that being late doesn't matter. It means expanding his awareness beyond this single frustrating circumstance to include the fuller context of his life. While still acknowledging the reality of the traffic jam, he might recognize that he has reliable transportation, a job he values enough to care about being punctual, and a phone to call ahead and manage expectations with his client. This shift isn't about forcing positivity, it's about completeness of perspective. Negative thinking thrives on narrow focus, zooming in exclusively on what's wrong while filtering out everything else. Gratitude widens the lens, allowing us to see both challenges and blessings simultaneously, creating a more balanced and accurate view of reality. Seneca wrote, "Nothing is more honorable than a grateful heart." The Stoics understood gratitude not merely as a pleasant emotion but as a virtue, a strength of character that enables us to perceive and respond to life more truthfully and effectively. Modern science confirms their intuition. Research consistently shows that people who practice gratitude experience less depression and anxiety, greater resilience during stress, improved sleep quality, and stronger relationships. So how do we cultivate this practice in daily life? One powerful approach is keeping a gratitude journal. Jennifer Ashton, 52, a hospital administrator from Minneapolis, began this practice during a particularly challenging period of her career. Each evening before bed, she writes down 3 specific things she's grateful for from that day, not general categories like family or health, but particular moments or experiences, the way the morning light filtered through the kitchen window. My colleague Mark's thoughtful feedback on my presentation, the sound of my daughter laughing during our phone call. This specificity matters. It trains your mind to notice and appreciate the texture of daily experience rather than dismissing it as routine. Over time, Jennifer found herself automatically registering moments of beauty, kindness, or joy throughout the day, mentally bookmarking them for her evening reflection. What began as a deliberate practice gradually became a lens through which she viewed her life. Another approach is the mental subtraction technique, imagining your life without something or someone you value. This creates the psychological contrast needed to refresh your appreciation. When we've had something for a long time, a relationship, good health, a home, abilities, our brains adapt to it and we stop registering it as something to appreciate. Anthony, 56, a teacher in Boston, practices this by occasionally imagining his life if he'd never met his partner of 20 years. It immediately cuts through any minor frustrations we're having, he explains. When I picture the absence of this relationship, the conversations never had, the growth never experienced, the memories never created, I'm overwhelmed with gratitude for what might easily never have been. For Michael in traffic, this might mean reflecting on how different his life would be without the career opportunity that has him driving downtown in the first place. Without changing his external reality, this mental shift alters his internal experience, reducing stress and enabling more effective responses. Gratitude is particularly powerful for countering one of the most common forms of negative thinking, social comparison. In our hyper-connected age, we're constantly exposed to curated highlights of others' lives, creating fertile ground for envy and inadequacy. When you find yourself falling into comparison, gratitude redirects your attention to your own unique journey and blessings. Carolyn, 39, a marketing executive in Seattle, noticed herself increasingly discontent with her house after scrolling through home design accounts on Instagram. I started keeping a home gratitude list, she explains. Instead of focusing on what our house lacks compared to these perfectly styled images, I note what I love about it. The reading nook where my kids pile in for stories, the kitchen island where friends gather during parties, the sunlight that fills our living room on winter afternoons. This practice doesn't prevent her from making improvements to her home, but it ensures those improvements come from a place of appreciation rather than dissatisfaction, a much healthier and more sustainable motivation. Expressing gratitude to others compounds its benefits, strengthening social bonds while deepening your own appreciation. Dr. Robert Emmons, a leading researcher on gratitude psychology, found that communicating gratitude to others enhances its positive effects beyond simply feeling it privately. Michael Cooper, 44, a software engineer from Portland, implemented a simple practice. Each morning, he sends a brief text or email to someone specific, expressing appreciation for something they've done or simply for their presence in his life. It completely changes how I start my day, he reports. Instead of immediately diving into problems to solve, I begin by recognizing the good that's already present in my life through the people around me. Even during genuine hardship, gratitude remains accessible through what psychologists call benefit finding, identifying elements of growth, learning, or connection within difficult experiences. This doesn't minimize suffering but acknowledges that hardship and value can coexist. When Lisa, 49, went through a difficult career transition after her company downsized, she practiced benefit finding by noting in her journal each evening, "Today, I'm grateful that this challenge has." The completions varied, reconnected me with former colleagues who've been incredibly supportive, pushed me to develop skills I'd been neglecting, shown me how resourceful I can be. This practice didn't make job hunting enjoyable, but it prevented her from defining herself solely as a victim of circumstances, maintaining the psychological flexibility needed to recognize and act on new opportunities. For Michael, stuck in traffic, a gratitude practice might transform his commute from wasted time to valuable transition space. He might use the unexpected delay to listen to an inspiring podcast, call a friend he's been meaning to connect with, or simply practice mindful breathing to arrive at his meeting centered despite being late. By focusing on what he can appreciate rather than what he can't control, he reclaims agency even in circumstances he didn't choose. Gratitude isn't magic. Michael will still be late, Jennifer still faces workplace challenges, and Lisa still needs to find a new job. But by shifting focus from what's lacking to what's present, from what's going wrong to what's available to appreciate, gratitude creates a psychological environment where negative thinking has less power and constructive responses become more accessible. As Marcus Aurelius advised, when you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. This orientation toward life, seeing it first as gift before addressing its challenges, forms the foundation of a resilient and grounded mind, less susceptible to the distortions of negative thinking and more capable of meeting life's inevitable difficulties with wisdom and equanimity. Lesson 9. Embracing flow, finding peace in impermanence. The Rodriguez family sits around their dining table in San Antonio, the remains of Sunday dinner scattered before them. Carlos, 52, looks at his wife Elena, 49, and their 3 children, Marco, 22, home from college for the weekend, Sofia, 18, preparing for graduation, and Diego, 16, increasingly independent as he navigates adolescence. Carlos feels a complex mixture of emotions: pride in the adults his children are becoming, nostalgia for the days when they were small, and an undercurrent of anxiety about the changes ahead. Marco will move across the country for graduate school in the fall. Sofia is choosing between universities. Even Diego is talking about summer programs away from home. "I wish we could freeze time," Carlos says, only half joking. "Just stay in this moment a little longer." His words express a universal human tendency: resistance to change, the desire to hold onto what we value, to keep things as they are. This resistance is at the heart of much of our suffering. We cling to pleasant experiences, hoping they'll last forever. We fight against difficult circumstances, refusing to accept their reality. We build elaborate structures of habit and routine to create the illusion of permanence in a world defined by constant flux. The ancient Stoics understood that this resistance creates unnecessary pain. As Marcus Aurelius observed, all things pass away. What we do in life, how we react, and the decisions we make, that's what remains ours. This insight points to one of life's most profound paradoxes. The path to peace isn't found in securing permanence, which is impossible, but in embracing impermanence itself. Heraclitus, a philosopher who influenced Stoic thought, famously stated that no man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river and he's not the same man. This metaphor captures the constant flow of existence. Everything is always changing, including ourselves. Resisting this fundamental truth doesn't stop change, it only creates suffering in the face of it. For Carlos and his family, embracing impermanence doesn't mean feeling no sadness about the transitions ahead. Rather, it means acknowledging these emotions without being overwhelmed by them, recognizing that change, even painful change, is not an aberration to be resisted but the natural order of life to be accepted. This acceptance isn't passive resignation. It's an active, clear-eyed recognition of reality that creates space for constructive response. When we stop expending energy fighting against what is, we can direct that energy toward navigating change skillfully. Jennifer Marshall, 44, discovered this principle during an unexpected career transition. After 15 years building a successful marketing career in Philadelphia, her company was acquired and her position eliminated. Her initial response was denial and resistance, endless rumination about the injustice, fantasies about the acquisition falling through, desperate attempts to maintain her professional identity exactly as it had been. "I spent months fighting reality," she recalls. "It was exhausting and completely unproductive. The turning point came when I finally accepted that this change had happened and couldn't be undone. That acceptance didn't solve my problems, but it freed me to start addressing them effectively instead of wasting energy on an impossible return to the past." This mental shift exemplifies what the Stoics called amor fati, love of fate, not in the sense of passive submission to events, but as an embracing of reality as it unfolds, including its challenges. Epictetus advised, "Don't seek for everything to happen as you wish it would, but rather wish that everything happens as it actually will, then your life will flow well." The wisdom of embracing impermanence applies not only to major life transitions but to everyday experiences. How often do we ruin pleasant moments by anxiously anticipating their end? How frequently do we extend the pain of difficult situations by mentally resisting their reality? The practice of accepting flow allows us to be fully present with what is, rather than mentally arguing with reality. Rachel Cohen, 38, a therapist in Denver, describes how this understanding transformed her relationship with chronic pain from an old injury. "I spent years fighting against the pain, seeing it as an enemy to vanquish," she explains. "The breakthrough came when I began relating to it differently, not as something that shouldn't be happening, but as part of my current reality to be worked with rather than against." This shift didn't eliminate Rachel's physical pain, but it dramatically reduced her mental suffering around it. By dropping the narrative that pain shouldn't be happening, she freed herself from the additional layer of distress that resistance creates. This is what the Buddhists call the second arrow. The first arrow is the unavoidable pain of life. The second, optional arrow is the suffering we create through resistance to that pain. In their family discussion that Sunday evening, Elena offers a perspective that helps Carlos. "We're not losing these moments, they're transforming into something new. The family we've been is becoming the family we'll be next. Different, but still connected." This reframing embodies another aspect of embracing impermanence, recognizing that endings and beginnings are two sides of the same coin. Every transition involves both loss and potential. When we fixate exclusively on what's ending, we miss the possibilities being born in the same moment. Marcus Aurelius articulated this cyclical understanding when he wrote, "Observe how all things are continually being born of change. Teach yourself to see that nature's highest happiness lies in changing the things that are, and forming new things after their kind." This natural process of transformation isn't something happening to us, it's something we're part of. The practice of embracing impermanence begins with awareness. Notice when you're mentally arguing with reality, when you're thinking, "This shouldn't be happening," or "I can't stand this changing." This resistance often manifests physically as tension, mentally as rumination, and emotionally as anxiety or anger. Once you recognize resistance, gently shift toward acceptance. This doesn't mean approving of painful situations or refusing to take action for change when appropriate. Rather, it means acknowledging what is true in this moment, even as you work towards something different. A powerful phrase from Stoic practice is "this too shall pass." Applied to both pleasant and difficult experiences, this reminder helps calibrate our perspective. It prevents us from clinging desperately to joyful moments, allowing us to appreciate them fully without the anxiety of anticipated loss. It also provides comfort during hardship, reminding us that no state, however painful, is permanent. Michael Sanderson, 57, applied this practice during a difficult period caring for his mother with dementia. There were days when the grief and stress felt unbearable, he shares. Reminding myself this too shall pass didn't diminish the real challenges, but it helped me avoid catastrophizing. It wasn't going to be like this forever, even though in the midst of it, it felt endless. Another practice for embracing impermanence is mindful attention to transition moments in daily life, the shift from day to night, the changing of seasons, the birthday that marks another year. Instead of moving through these transitions on autopilot or with resistance, we can use them as opportunities to practice conscious acceptance of change. Lisa Westbrook, 46, an artist in Chicago, creates seasonal rituals for her family that honor transitions rather than ignoring them. When summer ends, we don't just mourn the loss of warmth and freedom. We consciously welcome autumn with a special dinner where we share what we're looking forward to in the coming season. It teaches my children that change brings both endings and beginnings and helps them develop flexibility rather than rigid attachment. For Carlos and his family, embracing impermanence means holding their Sunday dinners precious without clinging to them, appreciating the unique configuration of this moment while remaining open to the new forms their family life will take. It means acknowledging the sadness of upcoming separations without labeling these changes as wrong or allowing anxiety about the future to steal from their present connection. 6 months later, with Marco studying across the country and Sofia settled at university just an hour away, the Rodriguez family creates a new Sunday tradition, a video call that brings them together across distances. It's different from their dinners around the table, carrying both loss and discovery. By embracing rather than resisting this flow, they find themselves able to appreciate what remains and what's newly emerging in their evolving family constellation. As Seneca wisely noted, every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. When we truly internalize this truth, not just intellectually but emotionally, we develop the capacity to move through life's inevitable changes with greater grace and less suffering. Finding peace not in static permanence but in conscious participation in the flowing river of experience. Lesson 10. Living on purpose, finding direction amid chaos. David Chen, 45, sits in his sleek corner office overlooking San Jose's tech corridor. As Chief Technology Officer at a successful software company, he's achieved what many would consider the pinnacle of professional success, influence, recognition, and financial security. Yet as the California sun sets beyond his floor-to-ceiling windows, a familiar emptiness settles in his chest. On paper, David has everything he once aspired to attain. But increasingly, he finds himself wondering, is this all there is? The metrics that once motivated him, career advancement, compensation packages, industry status, now feel hollow. The question he can't escape isn't about what he's achieved, but why it matters. At the heart of much negative thinking lies a fundamental lack of direction. When we don't have a clear sense of purpose, a why that transcends circumstance and gives meaning to both success and struggle, it's easy to feel lost, unmotivated, or overwhelmed by life's inevitable challenges. Purpose acts like a compass, guiding our thoughts, actions, and decisions through both calm seas and storms. Marcus Aurelius addressed this directly when he wrote, "People who labor all their lives but have no purpose to direct every thought and impulse are wasting their time, even when hard at work." This observation cuts to the core of modern discontent, the possibility of being busy, productive, and successful by external standards while feeling internally adrift. Purpose isn't just about what you achieve, it's about aligning your daily actions with your deepest values and what genuinely matters to you. It provides context for challenges, clarity for decisions, and a foundation that negative thinking struggles to erode. For David, the journey toward purpose begins with a simple but profound question: what would success mean if I defined it? Not his industry's definition, not his parents' expectations, not social media's highlight reel, but his authentic values. This inquiry leads him to realize that while he values the creativity and problem-solving of his work, what truly matters to him is using technology to address meaningful human challenges. This clarity doesn't prompt him to abandon his career, but to redirect it. He begins volunteering with an organization that teaches coding to underserved youth. He initiates a company initiative focused on accessibility features for users with disabilities. These aren't separate from his professional work, they're expressions of purpose through his existing role. Seneca wrote, "If one does not know to which port one is sailing, no wind is favorable." Without purpose, even favorable circumstances and opportunities can feel directionless. With purpose, even challenges become meaningful parts of a larger journey. Consider Maria Gonzalez, 51, who built a successful restaurant business in Chicago. After a devastating fire destroyed her flagship location, she faced enormous practical and financial challenges. What carried her through wasn't just determination but purpose. Her restaurant wasn't merely a business but an expression of her family's culinary heritage and a gathering place for her community. "If I had been in it just for profit, I might have taken the insurance money and walked away," she explains. "But I understood why this work mattered to me beyond dollars. That clarity gave me the strength to rebuild when logic might have said to quit." Purpose acts as an antidote to negative thinking in several ways. First, it provides perspective during difficulties. When you're clear about what matters most, temporary setbacks and challenges become part of a larger narrative rather than defining moments. Second, purpose helps filter out distractions and unnecessary comparisons. In a world of endless options and constant exposure to others' choices, purpose provides criteria for discernment. Without it, you're vulnerable to chasing whatever society currently values or comparing yourself to metrics that may not reflect what truly matters to you. James Patterson, 47, a high school teacher in Minneapolis, describes how purpose shields him from negative comparisons. "I have friends who make 3 times my salary in corporate jobs. Without clarity about my purpose in education, I might constantly feel I'm falling short financially. But when I remember why I teach, the moments of breakthrough with students, the privilege of shaping young minds, those comparisons lose their power." Third, purpose connects daily actions to deeper meaning, transforming routine into ritual. Even mundane tasks take on significance when understood as expressions of what matters most. Sarah Kim, 38, a hospice nurse in Philadelphia, explains, "The administrative paperwork in healthcare can seem tedious. But when I see it as part of providing dignity and comfort to patients in their final days, my deepest purpose, even filling out forms, becomes meaningful. It's not just paperwork, it's part of how I honor human life at its most vulnerable stage." So how do you discover and build a purpose-driven life? Start by reflecting on moments when you felt most alive, engaged, and fulfilled. What were you doing? Who were you serving? What values were you expressing? These peak experiences often contain clues to your deeper purpose. For David, this reflection reveals that his most satisfying moments weren't receiving industry awards or closing major deals, but rather mentoring younger engineers and seeing technology solutions make genuine differences in users' lives. These memories point toward a purpose centered around using his technical expertise to empower others, a far more sustaining why than status or advancement. Next, consider what problems or needs in the world naturally draw your attention and concern. We often find purpose at the intersection of what matters to us and what's needed in our communities. This doesn't necessarily require grand global ambitions. Purpose can be expressed in local, intimate ways. Elena Martinez, 42, a financial analyst in San Antonio, discovered her purpose when repeatedly noticing how many women in her community struggled with basic financial literacy. This observation, combined with her professional skills, led to a weekend workshop series that has grown into a significant community resource. Her purpose, empowering financial independence, flows through both her career and volunteer work. Another approach is to clarify your core values, the principles that matter most to you regardless of external reward or recognition. Common examples include creativity, connection, service, growth, integrity, and family. When you identify your most essential values, you can intentionally design your life to express them daily. Robert Jackson, 56, restructured his successful law practice around his core value of justice, shifting from corporate work to representing clients who wouldn't otherwise have access to quality legal representation. His income decreased, but his sense of purpose and satisfaction dramatically increased. "I'm still using the same legal skills," he explains, "but now they're aligned with what truly matters to me." Purpose doesn't need to be a single, dramatic mission. Many people express purpose through multiple channels: career, relationships, creativity, community involvement, personal growth. What matters isn't the specific form, but the alignment between your deepest values and how you live each day. For David, this understanding brings liberation. Rather than feeling he needs to abandon his career to find meaning, he sees how his existing skills and position can become vehicles for his emerging purpose. This shift doesn't eliminate all challenges or moments of doubt, but it transforms his relationship to them. 6 months into his intentional purpose work, David faces a major setback when a project he championed fails to meet expectations. In the past, this situation would have triggered intense negative thinking, questioning his abilities, fearing for his professional reputation, perhaps even spiraling into questions about his worth. With purpose as his foundation, his perspective is different. The setback is real and disappointing, but it's no longer an existential threat because his sense of value isn't exclusively tied to this particular outcome. He can assess what went wrong, learn from the experience, and continue expressing his purpose through new initiatives. Marcus Aurelius counseled, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, 'I have to go to work as a human being.'" This reminder cuts through the fog of negative thinking by connecting daily activities to our deeper humanity and purpose. We rise not just to complete tasks or meet obligations, but to express who we truly are and what genuinely matters. As you navigate negative thinking patterns, consider how a clearer sense of purpose might transform your perspective. When challenges arise, ask, how does this connect to what matters most to me? What values can I express even in this difficult situation? When making decisions, consider, which choice best aligns with my deeper purpose? By building a life anchored in purpose, you create a foundation that negative thinking struggles to shake. Even amid inevitable difficulties, you maintain access to a sense of meaning and direction that transcends temporary circumstances, a North Star guiding you through life's darkest nights toward dawn. As our journey through Stoic wisdom for conquering negative thinking comes to a close, let's take a moment to reflect on the path we've traveled together. We've explored 10 powerful strategies rooted in ancient philosophy yet perfectly suited for navigating our modern challenges. We began with the fundamental Stoic insight that it's not events themselves that disturb us, but our perceptions of them. Like Jessica Taylor facing client criticism in New York, we discovered that by controlling our interpretations, we gain freedom from unnecessary suffering. This principle forms the foundation upon which all other mental mastery is built. We then explored how negative thought patterns take root in our past experiences and self-protective mechanisms. By understanding these origins, as Dr. James Rivera did in Phoenix, we can begin to loosen their grip and challenge their authority in our lives. Through Catherine West's story in Houston, we witnessed how the mind can be renovated, negative patterns unlearned and replaced with more constructive ones. We saw that thoughts are habits, not immutable truths, and that with practice, we can change the mental landscapes we inhabit. Ryan Alvarez in San Diego showed us the profound impact of our environments, digital, physical, and social. By curating these influences intentionally, we create an ecosystem where positive thinking can naturally flourish. With Megan Thompson in Philadelphia, we discovered how action disrupts negative thinking cycles. When we focus on what's within our control and take purposeful steps forward, we break the paralysis that negativity creates. Eliza Montgomery's journey in Los Angeles revealed the power of words to shape our reality. By changing our internal dialogue and external communication, we transform the very structure of our thoughts and experiences. Dr. Alicia Jackson's resilience in Dallas demonstrated that we can develop the capacity to bend without breaking, to meet life's inevitable challenges with courage and clarity rather than being overwhelmed by them. Through Michael Reeves' practice of gratitude in Chicago traffic, we learned how shifting focus from what's missing to what's present creates a more balanced and accurate view of reality. The Rodriguez family in San Antonio taught us the peace that comes from embracing impermanence, accepting change as the natural order of life rather than resisting it in futile struggle. And finally, David Chen's search for meaning in San Jose illuminated how purpose provides direction amid chaos, a compass that guides our thoughts and actions even during our most challenging moments. These aren't separate techniques but interconnected facets of a single transformative approach to life, one that acknowledges difficulty without being defined by it, that faces reality squarely while maintaining the power to choose our response. As Marcus Aurelius reminded us, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. This wisdom is your inheritance, a proven path to mental freedom tested across centuries and cultures. As you move forward from this conversation, I encourage you to begin with one practice that resonated most strongly. Perhaps it's questioning your perceptions, practicing gratitude, or clarifying your purpose. Start small but consistently, knowing that each step builds momentum toward a more clear-minded, resilient way of being. Remember, negative thinking isn't your natural state, it's simply a habit you've developed. And with the wisdom of Stoicism as your guide, it's a habit you have the power to change one thought at a time. The journey toward mental freedom begins now with your next thought. You've got this. If you found this exploration of Stoicism insightful, I encourage you to subscribe for more content that delves into the wisdom of ancient philosophy and its relevance to modern life. Share this discussion with others who may benefit from these insights, and together, let us cultivate a community committed to personal growth and self-improvement.